Today we're diving into a condition that affects millions of women but is, famously misunderstood: polycystic ovary syndrome, or PCOS. Some incredible new research is completely changing how we see it, and we're going to break down exactly what that means for everyone.
Right, so if you or someone you know has PCOS, you are probably all too familiar with this frustrating puzzle. One person struggles with fertility, another is dealing with metabolic issues, and a third has a totally different set of symptoms. So how can one single diagnosis cover such a wildly different range of experiences? Well, it turns out it might not be just one condition after all.
And get this, we're not talking about some niche issue here. PCOS affects up to 13% of women across the globe. That's more than 1 in 10 women. This makes it a huge global health priority that has, until right now, been just notoriously difficult to pin down.
So that brings us to the core problem that's challenged doctors and patients for decades, what we're calling the PCOS puzzle. It's an incredibly heterogeneous condition, which is just a fancy way of saying it shows up in completely different ways for different people.
For a long time, the diagnosis of PCOS has kind of become this giant, broad umbrella term. But this catch-all approach makes it almost impossible to predict long-term health risks or to create treatment plans that are actually personalized. It's left both doctors and patients feeling pretty frustrated.
But what if we could finally crack this code? Well, that's exactly what a massive international research effort set out to do. By analyzing data on a scale that we've really never seen before for PCOS. And when I say the scale was enormous, I mean it. Scientists looked at 9 key clinical metrics from over 11,000 women with PCOS. And just to make sure the results weren't some kind of fluke, they then validated their findings across 5 different international groups, from China, the US, Europe, Singapore, Brazil, you name it. The data was seriously robust. And what they found? Well, it's a total game changer. By using machine learning to find patterns in all that data, they revealed that PCOS isn't just one condition. It actually appears to be 4 totally distinct subtypes. Look at this. The 4 subtypes are almost evenly distributed. Each one accounts for roughly a quarter of everyone with PCOS. This tells us right away that the one-size-fits-all approach we've been using has been missing the mark for millions of women.
Okay, so let's meet the 4 subtypes, shall we? Starting with the first one, Hyperandrogenic, or HA-PCOS. And as that name suggests, this one is all about hormones.
So women in this group have the highest levels of androgens, male hormones like testosterone. And while their metabolic issues might seem pretty mild at first, the research shows a really high long-term risk of dyslipidemia. That's basically an unhealthy imbalance of fats like cholesterol in your blood.
All right, up next is the second subtype, obesity-related, or OB-PCOS. And as you can probably guess, this group is defined less by hormones and way more by its metabolic profile.
The key word here is severity. This group has the highest BMI, the highest glucose, and the highest insulin levels. And, crucially, they're the ones who face the most severe long-term metabolic complications, like type 2 diabetes and hypertension.
Now, moving to our third subtype, the picture changes completely. This is high SHBG-PCOS, and it's named for a really important protein in your blood that acts as a kind of protector. So this subtype is, in a lot of ways, the complete opposite of the last one. These individuals have the highest levels of that protective protein called Sex Hormone-Binding Globulin, or SHBG, and they also have the lowest BMI. This all means they actually have the best prognosis, with the most favorable outcomes for both their fertility and their long-term metabolic health. And finally, that brings us to our fourth subtype, high LH/AMH-PCOS. This group is defined by 2 specific hormones that are absolutely central to ovarian function and fertility. Okay, so this group has the highest levels of Luteinizing Hormone, which is what triggers ovulation, and Anti-Müllerian Hormone, which relates to your egg reserve. This unique hormonal profile makes their condition super persistent. It has the lowest rate of just going away over time. And as we're about to see, it carries a very, very serious risk during fertility treatments.
So, okay, we have 4 different subtypes. Why does this matter so much? Because when the research followed these women over time, it became crystal clear that they walk very different paths with vastly different health outcomes.
I mean, just look at how dramatically different the long-term outcomes are. Over about 6.5 years, women with that OB-PCOS subtype had a 16% chance of developing type 2 diabetes, Compare that to just 3.7% for the SHBG subtype. Their risk of hypertension was more than 4 times higher. These are not small differences, these are huge.
And it's the exact same dramatic story when we look at fertility. For IVF treatments, the SHBG subtype had the highest live birth rate and the lowest rate of pregnancy loss. On the flip side, the OB subtype had the lowest live birth rate and the highest pregnancy loss. Just knowing the subtype could completely change a person's expectations and their treatment strategy.
And remember that specific risk I mentioned for the LH-PCOS subtype? Well, here it is. Their risk of something called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which is a really dangerous IVF complication, is over 7 times higher than the control group. That is an absolutely critical piece of information for any fertility doctor to have.
So when you put all of this data together, it points to one really powerful conclusion. We are entering a new era for PCOS diagnosis and treatment, one that's finally built on personalization. The study authors themselves put it perfectly. They said reliable subtypes serve as the foundation of precision medicine. So this isn't just about sticking a new label on things, it's about creating a framework for truly individualized care.
So what does the future of PCOS care actually look like? Well, it boils down to a pretty clear 3-step process. First, you identify a patient's specific subtype using simple clinical data. Second, you predict their unique risks based on that subtype. And third, you personalize their treatment, tailoring everything from lifestyle advice all the way to IVF protocols to match that exact risk profile. This research really transforms a confusing, one-size-fits-all diagnosis into a clear, personal roadmap. It empowers both patients and their doctors to manage the condition proactively. And it leaves us with a really powerful question for millions of women around the world. Could knowing your subtype truly change your future?